Hi, welcome to another episode. This is your host, Brian Maddox. I'm here today with Jay Miller from Kyber Digital. Welcome, Jay.
Great to be here.
Awesome. So, Jay, do us a little favor and tell us how you started Kyber, kind of how you ended up where you're at right now. Not physically, mind you, but in general in the career. And we'll go from there on the marketing stuff.
Yeah, you might be able to tell from my somewhat half done setup here behind me, but like I was a musician first, and basically Kyber at the time was a means to an end. Like we were touring nonstop, eating a lot of peanut butter and jelly and McChickens, from McDonald's, and it got to the point where all of us were trying to make money doing something else. I fell into web design and SEO from my actual day job when I wasn't touring. The boss just kind of came to me one day and said, "Hey, like you need to build this one client a website." I'd never built a site before. I'd done a lot of marketing stuff prior to that, but so I fell into that through him, and then it kind of turned into a lot of freelance work. I started building websites in the back of a touring van, like between cities. So we'd be like driving from Nashville to Memphis or something, and like in the back of the van, just like building sites. Started to take off, and eventually my other guitar player, Aaron, I kind of said, "Hey, like, do you want to do this with me? Because I just need help. I can't manage all this stuff by myself now. It was growing." And he said, "Yeah, sure." Like, so then it became the two of us working on hotspot from our phones in the back of the van. Like there's like pictures of us still doing this together.
That's awesome.
And so, long story short, COVID kind of destroyed the band's hopes and dreams. Let's just word it that way. We eventually got old, and it turned into, the opportunity for the agency was just so large and so in front of us that it kind of directed where our focus was going to go. So then it turned into what it turned into, and it evolved into what it is today. But it started literally in the back of a van touring the country. So that's how it began, and that's how I ended up here.
So, all right, I have to ask some ridiculous questions first.
Sure.
How many members of the band are involved in your company?
Now, with myself, 3. It was the Aaron was the guitar player. He's now the web designer. He's been doing web design for the last 5 years. And now we have Neil, who's one of our main copywriters. And Neil was always the guy in the band who, when we did interviews, it'd be like, all of us just no, we got to give it to him. He's the wordsmith. Like nobody wants us to say anything in front of a camera. Just let Neil do it. And he was just naturally better at it than we were. And he took up copywriting during COVID because he just really liked it. It just naturally. I mean, this guy used to like buy newspapers in between tour stops just for the fun of it. He would buy a local newspaper and read it, see how people wrote, and then get the history of it. So his mind worked really well that way. So we brought him in, and now he's doing copy. I just got to get the drummer in here somehow. He's doing production in LA, working on some really large projects that you would definitely know the names of, some Grammy Award winning artists. And I just got to get him involved somehow, and then I'll have roped in the whole group somehow.
that has got to be one of the most interesting stories, origin stories for both a band and a marketing company I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's been fun, but we're all still like playing music together. We're all still doing this, and my team, when Neil and Aaron and I both get on some kind of team call, like my COO said it one day. She's like, "We don't even stand a chance. You guys just go." Like, just So it's made the culture very fun too, because it's like everything's a lot more laid back when it comes to the way that we integrate together.
So how do you think that impacts your work?
Let me, without stroking the back of my own ego or anything, I will tell you what Neil just told me 2 days ago. Because Neil's only been here for 2 months, so this is pretty new for him. And I said to him in a Slack message, like, P.S. How wild is it that you and me are even having this conversation at this company? Like, this is just so bizarre. We've been touring together for 10 years and then playing music together for even longer. And like, I said, dude, it's actually kind of nuts how invested and integrated and just committed to the cause all of these people are. Like, because he had no idea. Like, we didn't talk about my business outside of just passing by when we were like doing other things. And so it was interesting to him to see how much this has grown, but more so like how committed to what Kyber's goals are that all of our employees are actually committed to. So it's been interesting to watch. And I think that with him being newer, he kind of like gives that outside perspective, but I think it's because of the way that we run the company, which is very much more, it's a laid back environment, but we also really push to bring in a sense of like community. And I always, as an advocate for my employees, tried to find ways to encourage them to grow. And I've never held back from that. Like, if they needed a laptop because their laptop was dying, I'd buy them a MacBook. We have a corporate Apple account. I think to this date, I bought like 12 MacBooks for the team so far. And like, I ship them to the Philippines, even to the VAs, if someone needed software, I just buy it. I'm like, yeah, no problem. We need an upgrade. Okay. Like, I want to make their lives easier. And we're also consistently asking, like, hey, like, we're looking for feedback. How can I make this process better for you? How can I make it better for your VAs? How can I make this easier for us? Like, this is what we're trying to do. Are we on the right track? So because I've allowed some of the team leads and even the all the way down to the bottom, the cogs in the wheel, the VAs, to really own their processes and have say over how they go, so long as they are correlating with our goals, deadlines, and objectives, it really feels like everyone's been kind of integrated into the entire process, where there is no compartmentalization any longer. Like, everybody at the company knows what everybody's role is and how it affects everybody else and what the core mission is moving forward for the company. And I think that's been a big part of it. And I'll leave you this one story, like, real quick. But like, two of my people on my team are yoga instructors. So one day they came to me and they said, "Hey, can we teach yoga like once a week?" I'm like, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. It's like, yeah, go ahead. Like, and I'm on, like, probably on the floor one day, and I'm like using my chirp wheel, and I'm doing all the yoga with all the team on a Zoom call with everybody else. And I'm sitting there going, like, how the hell did I end up here doing yoga with people that I pay? Like, it was so bizarre, man. So yeah, I think that's why we have like a fun environment, because like, I just don't think I'm a typical CEO in that regard. But I come from the punk grounds, Warped Tour and stuff. So I just feel like I'm not wired as much as someone from another background would be. So I think that's what made the culture what it is, to give you a long story short, but that's kind of the gist of it.
So, yeah, I think it's important too. I mean, when you start talking about this stuff, it's obvious that the performance culture that you have also leads to, particularly, given that the art side of that conversation, you have to be able to, trust these folks in a performance setting. And the only way you're going to get there is if you build that rapport, which I think is it's a spot on approach to driving engagement and stuff like that. So when you talk to your clients, is that something that you bring out, or your prospects? Is that something you dial into your marketing program? How does that factor into how you go to market?
Believe it or not, it doesn't really. Ironically enough, the prospects don't really know a lot about how our company works internally, and they don't know a lot about what really makes the processes work for them until they're already here. We have some, like, our social media always needs work. It's like something that, like, I personally don't spend a lot of time on, right. But that's not our focus as an agency or as a consultancy either. So I think for me, it's always been, let me focus on the prospects' problems and what they need and why they're even talking to me. Because at the end of the day, they don't care about me. They don't care about what we do. They don't care about my team. Like, the only thing they care about is making sure that we can solve their problems and getting them ahead. Because the reality is they only care about themselves. That's not to say that they're selfish. That's just the way people are programmed. So especially the business owners or the people who are responsible for revenue growth at a business. So when we go into sales calls, it's a no BS environment where we dive right in, and I just say, look, like, why are you here? What can we do? What are you struggling with? And we go down a discovery call framework that is solely focused around questions and focused around them and not us. So we actually barely talk about us. And when we do, it's like a 5 minute, pinpoint in the conversation all the way at the tail end of it, and then we get into the pitch, and the pitch is only 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes long. And then it goes into back and forth questions. So that's really it. Like, we don't focus on us at all. The only time that they actually see the culture is from the Instagram and social media posts that we have, where we're kind of like highlighting what we do. And I will say that something I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on that's been client facing has been we have on our website, our your team page, and it has everybody's headshots. But then I said, look, we can't make this boring. Like, no one cares. Like, it's got to be entertaining. It's got to be fun. So I said, give us a little snippet about yourself to make it funny, make it interesting. Like, tell us what you do, but in a funny way. I think my staple in their mind was just said, what would Tom Hanks do? Ask yourself every day, what would Tom Hanks do? That's it. It doesn't say anything else about me. So we tried to make it fun so that when people read it, it's like, okay, this is a real company with real people, with a real culture. It's not just a bunch of guys in a workshop somewhere. And I think that kind of speaks a lot to the type of people we're also trying to attract, because I don't want, the guy that has no emotions whatsoever and is just like a grinder for money, So I think that it's interesting. That's really the only time that clients actually see the forward-facing part of our culture is on the team page and on our social media. And every once in a while, I'll have a LinkedIn post go viral because I talk about some of this stuff where I say we have a 4-day work week, and we have a shorter work day, and we start pretty late, and most of our team is not micromanaged. They're very much remote, and as long as they hit their deadlines, we don't care when the work gets done. It could be 4 a.m, right. So I think because of the I trust you to get the job done type of mentality, it's kind of it attracted more people to want to work here, but it hasn't attracted prospects. And I don't think it probably never will, because I don't think the prospects care, if that makes any sense. So we just, it's interesting. I mean,
and having done a lot of work in the space myself, I think it's, yes, they care about what you can do, right? Like the outcomes you can create is important, but a lot of folks, believe it or not, are also interested in how you win, right? So, and that how you win, in some ways, gets really important. It's really important after the fact, right? How was the experience you've created during the process? It's they refer to it in Power of Moments. Chip and Dan Heath. It's an excellent book if you get a chance. And they talk about creating these moments that are impactful and important. And when you're talking about taking a client through a journey, it's an outrageous way to get positive lasting impressions or positive lasting change, particularly in cases where that's important. But I want to get back briefly to the parts of the business then. So in your forward facing business, you've got some challenges there as well in the terms of what you're selling versus what the market's ready to buy. So can you walk us through that a little bit? Because I'm interested to hear how you've addressed some of those gaps.
Well, I mean, I've been tackling a couple areas of this as we go, right? So we've shifted a lot from who we started with too, which is worth saying. When I started the company, we were working with local service companies, contractors, roofers, plumbers, lawyers, and we still have a bunch of those on the roster. But it ended up being great through COVID because the service guys were mandatory workers, so working, yeah. And they were busy as hell throughout the whole time. Right. But as the agency grew and we started to figure out what we wanted to actually focus on, I started to, I hired a business coach. I started reading a lot of books. I tried to figure out what am I going to do for the next 5 years, because it was a side hustle and then it wasn't anymore. Right. So we shifted into realistically what I was very good at, which was strategy, data, and content marketing and execution. That was the three areas that we were very good at. And content marketing encompasses SEO and ads, but the actual overall for all the brand. So when we build out a campaign for somebody, typically I tell them, we got to do the strategy first. I'm not going to just implement a campaign based on a questionnaire. Like, we have to really dive deep. I need to understand the market trends, the consumer trends. I need to understand your business, how your business, has marketing and sales enablement, what's your software stack looks like, because I'm looking at the revenue. I'm looking at the bottom dollar of, like, if I'm bringing this client on, getting leads in the door is not enough. Getting, even, a solid amount of appointments for somebody or closes isn't enough. I want to know if their bottom dollar revenue went up. And if it didn't, then I don't think it's a success. Like, why would they stay? It doesn't allow me to have long-term retention as an agency or as a consultant.
Right.
So what I do is I just tell them, like, this is what I'm really good at. This is my expertise. And you have to do it this way or I won't work with you. That's it. Because why would you let the client dictate the strategy when they obviously can't figure it out for themselves, and they're coming to you and they're saying, hey, I want you to do it this way. And you're like, well, if you were doing it this way already and now you just want us to execute and it wasn't working, why would we repeat that process?
Yeah.
And I had a couple clients, or I should say prospects, that said, I just want to do this. And I said, that's not going to work. And they insisted. I said, well, then we're not the right fit. I just said that this isn't going to work for us, because I don't believe that your strategy is going to work from what we're looking at from a data perspective and from history and experience. So I eventually walked away from that project because I said, it's not worth it. My name's going to be put on the line. I know that our team is going to be frustrated because they can't implement the things that they know work. So, a long story short, to your question, I stick to what I know, and I stick to what I'm really good at, and I stick to the motif of, you're hiring us for a reason. Here's the expected return. Here's how long it's going to take. Here are the results. Take it or leave it. That's sort of the gist about it. But it all comes from the strategy, which implements, like, it's customization versus, I guess, configuration. Like, we have a configuration that is built, that is tried and true and proven. The customization just happens with plugging in some of the data and the branding and the tactics that work for that particular client and that particular campaign. But the configuration of what we do has driven hundreds of millions of dollars. So I stick with what I know for that reason alone.
So, but your space, your market is a noisy one, right? There's lots and lots of players out there, and not a lot of them are approaching the market in the same way you are, right? So you have, you have this in a lot of consultancies, right? You have the folks out there that have given us all a bad name, as it were. So, so how do you deal with a crowded marketplace and a fair amount of distrust from the prospect base broadly? No, I mean, maybe I'm generalizing a little bit too much, but there's a lot of, like, I don't know what that is. That sounds like voodoo. How do you navigate that stuff?
Well, the easiest way is proving results and being able to show your prior results. That's just a given. Client reviews and testimonials can be faked, but if you can pull up data, it says, like, here's something we did for this client, here's the results that they had. That's hard to argue, right? Especially if it's in a difficult market. So the first thing is results. The second thing we did was we actually, on the sales end, stopped using trigger words for these people. So we stopped using the word ads. We stopped using the word SEO. We stopped using the word agency. We stopped using the word marketing, right? And we only focused on bottom line revenue growth and business development. And that was one thing that we separated. And we have an agency that implements content marketing and implements ads and SEO, but we're actually in the midst of a rebrand to move towards consultancy, because we do a lot more than just content marketing. And we've never really been an SMMA. We've always done the extra stuff. And now we're getting into financial analysis, and we're getting into data aggregation and visualization for large data hub clients where we're doing automated offline conversions and we're pulling in like all of this web data and then giving it to their CFOs to say, here's how you can expand into your next area. Like, here's the money. This is where it's coming from. This is where you can correlate your best users to. So it became a lot more than just an agency, but we focused very heavily on marketing. So that was the other side about it, is it's marketing focused, revenue generation focused, and hyper growth focused. Ironically enough, one of the guys that I just closed, it's a tech company working with some very large companies like Lego and Nestle and stuff. They said to me on the call, they're like, you're not like a typical agency. Like, we've talked to all of these other guys. They go and get business degrees. They've taken courses, from HubSpot. They've done a lot of just going up the ladder ranks. And you guys aren't really like that. And I just go against the grain based upon how I've been coached, because I can't take credit for all this myself. And also just what I've experienced, which is the lots and lots and lots of sales calls where we were viewed as a vendor that was, one, disposable, and two, was like everybody else. Yeah. So beyond just those couple things of we positioned ourselves not as an agency, but as a consultancy, we're extremely confident and extremely direct on calls where I say we're doing it our way or we're not doing it at all, because I know it's going to work. That level of confidence really portrays something that agencies don't, because agencies tend to like, oh, you need a proposal. Here you go. Here's our proposal with our stuff. They don't even ask questions. Right. So it's like, that's why you're a vendor, because you didn't even ask why that budget, why do you need this? Why? So they're not diving deep enough into discovery on sales. And then I guess the third and final thing is simply just creating a unique mechanism that we own that they can't get anywhere else. And we do that in two different ways. One, we have an actual mechanism that is very unique to us called quantum search. This is a very different way of merging data, ads, and SEO all together to make them compound from an algorithmic and analytical perspective. And we do it through content marketing. So it's all driven through video. Nobody in the world is doing that. The closest thing to it is maybe Neil Patel. And it's just something that I stumbled on going from conference to conference to conference to conference and seeing that nobody touched it. No one did it. No one was merging these two things together in a good way. So we found a small gap, we built it, and now we're scaling it. The other thing that made it really unique outside of a unique mechanism was having a unique sales process. Kind of what you said, like talking about like customer journeys and really owning that customer journey all the way through. We have a very different sales process that they're not used to, because we dive in and ask really difficult questions that most of the time they can't answer. And that to them is kind of like a culture shock almost to themselves. They say, oh, wasn't expecting this type of call today. And that's how we get into it. I'm also very blunt. Like the way I'm talking to you right now is the way I talk to prospects. It's like, there is no different. You get me, you get the authentic real me. And if you don't like it, then we're not for you. So, but that's sort of, I think, what really sets us apart is the presentation, the attitude about which we go about it. And also we're very data led, and it's something that we built for 4 years straight to develop this. And, pretty much since COVID started, it was really the crux of the beginning of it. And that was how we created, something that stands out, that's unique to us, that they can't pinpoint that any other agency has, and the way in which we go about sales. And I guess to wrap this up in a pin, I also have developed a pretty large network. So if I can't do it, I can typically pull somebody in who's like a world-renowned specialist in whatever it is that I can't do. So having that network has really allowed me to say, oh, like, you need somebody to handle your GDPR in Italy and your server issues with compliance. I got a guy for that. That does all of Europe, like no problem. Really weird enterprise level advanced problems that I have no business even being in, but I know somebody, so I can pass off these weird problems to somebody else in my network. And that's also been a very good driver for sales.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. I want to make sure that we're being sensitive to your time and our listeners' time. So let's start to wrap this up. I do want to ask a couple questions on the way out, though. My standard Columbo style, like, just one more thing. First, we'll go with who should reach out to you? Who's a good connect and how should they get a hold of you?
First, on the talent side, anybody that's looking for a job that wants to work remote, I'm always looking for people in any department, period, for anything related to digital marketing and sales. So that's the first thing. I can't hire everybody, but I am always looking. So the second is for people that want to work with us. We're industry agnostic, but we do focus in a couple areas, and that's mostly the tech industry. So it's MarTech, software, SaaS, any type of fintech even. And we're working primarily with a couple partners on the data side to really make those things have financial backing, so they can see what's actually driving their actual growth from a marketing and sales perspective, and not just guessing. All going all the way down to user input data. So I can say, who are your best 1,000 customers and where did they come from? And how many touch points did it take? And when was that conversion happening? So now we can correlate actual huge revenue jumps to the marketing campaign all the way through the buyer journey into retention, which a lot of companies are missing, especially even the ones that are tied up to Salesforce. So basically any tech company that's trying to get to the 100 million mark, really a good company for us to work with. But we'll tackle almost anything because our tactics remain the same. The strategy configuration remains the same. It just comes down to what is going to be something that we implement versus something we might outsource. But most of the strategy around what we do remains the same. But those are the areas that we're really focusing in primarily at the moment.
Gotcha. All right. And the last question, it sounds like you've had a long, strange trip so far. Super interested to see where it goes. So I want to make sure I put the seed out there now for the next interview, maybe a year or so. But the thing that I want to ask you is that in this journey, in this trip that you've taken to get to where you are, what are the three biggest kind of lessons you picked up along the way that really have either helped you the most or shaken you the most or whatever?
The bigger the company is, the more that's screwed up on the back end. That's, I can't say that. You look at some, I can't name the names, but you get into the back and you're like, oh my God, this is a train wreck. It's so bad. And nobody knows what's going on.
They don't have to be agile. That's the problem, right? When you have to sing for your supper every day, you eliminate all the BS. And when you're a large corporate, you just got so much momentum.
Literally, it's after 30 people in a company, it just starts to become a disaster on the back end, and they stop tracking things. That everything becomes a mess, and all the way through every department, everything is it all. And I'm not saying it's all bad, but it's it all just ends up being,
Yeah, absolutely.
That was the first big lesson I learned. And to quote my business coach, Brian Cristiano, one of the biggest things that I found was creating a wedge, which was, instead of pitching the full service up front, I would instead create the blueprint or the strategy or the piece of it that you would have to do anyway. And remember I said we do strategy first, that is our wedge, but we go in and we essentially do an assessment first before we do the full proposal or the full service, the full output. I never thought about it that way until I was trained to think about it that way. But essentially what it allows us to do is have a very low form of commitment, a very low form of engagement that's very low risk, but allows whichever company we're working with to have a very detailed finger on the pulse assessment of where they are, not just from, hey, we ran an SEM rush report. It's more here's what we saw between all of your product, your UX, your software, your marketing, your sales, and where you're missing revenue, where your current spend analysis is, where the gaps are, where you're double over tracking information, really having a holy crap, this is what's on fire type of a moment. And that has allowed us to propel sales because of the way that we structure our deals. And it kind of gives you that 30-day run rate of getting to know each other before you get in bed with each other. So you're going on a date, right? That was a really big takeaway for me with marketing and sales. And the third thing I kind of didn't learn, but I kind of followed my gut, was to just be completely authentic. What I've found is that me being very off the cusp, being how I am, our slogan literally on the back end is punk as fuck, and people are like, I come from a punk background, but in our world, what that really meant was go against the grain, be the JFK, be the Tom DeLonge that everyone thought was crazy until the government said aliens do exist. Right. So it always was go against the grain and do what your heart says and follow that. And when it came to business for a long time, I was like, oh, I need to have this type of camera. I need to have this type of lighting. I need to dress a certain way. I need to have this many results. I need to have, and none of it really at the end of the day mattered. I realized that I just had to be exactly who I was and just follow true north as my moral compass. Yeah. And the karma would come. And it has. And all I've done is push and not worry what other people thought. And I said, if I'm sticking to what I believe is true, none of the rest matters. And the people that believe what I believe will by nature come. And they have. So that's all I would say is that, it's also allowed me to get over my fear of being on camera, because I used to hate being on camera. I used to hate content. I still hate filming content, but I'm just like, you know what? I'm doing this because I know I have to.
You're doing well. You're clearly the fear hasn't stopped you from creating quality stuff. So
we got to get better at it. There's always stuff to improve, but I'd say the authenticity is magnetic, and that's something I've just naturally seen on the business end that I had seen from a social perspective when we were touring and around kids and promoters. But taking it to the business world and just being my authentic self was something that I didn't expect to get so much, both attracting the bad people that thought that they could take advantage of it, or attracting the people who were genuinely really good A players that were like, I just can't believe that I had finally found somebody I can trust, or I finally found somebody I can even just have a conversation with where there's no ulterior motive, So I think that that's been a huge part of our growth is it's allowed me to network a lot easier as well.
That's awesome. Jay, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. This has been excellent. I think I'll be sure to let you know when this is coming out, but I think our listeners here have gotten a ton of value. So thank you for sharing your expertise.
Thanks for having me, man. It was a lot of fun. I plan on coming back. So.
Awesome. I'd love to hear that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Consulting Trap. If you have suggestions for future episodes or would like to be a guest on our show, please send me an email at brian@podcastchef.com. That's BRIAN at PODCASTCHEF.com. Before we go, we'd like to thank the sponsor of our show, Podcast Chef. Podcast Chef helps turn ordinary podcasting into a revenue-generating lead magnet for your consulting business. Our Podcasting Done For You service takes away the headache of starting up and running your own podcast. Reach out now to take advantage of our 30-day money-back guarantee. Visit us at podcastchef.com to find out how our team of experts can help you leverage podcasting to take your business to the next level.